And we are live. I am the host. Oh, wait a second. We aren't live. What happened there? Have you ever had that happen on StreamYard where it doesn't actually go live?
I think if you don't click it both times, like
I
get it right.
did.
No, I
Huh.
have. Yeah, who knows? Yeah, it
Let's
still
try
says
again.
scheduled. Yep. Let's do it one more time.
This time we're live. We are live. I am the host. This is Crash Canon, discussions with Catholics about Catholicism and other various things associated with the faith. But tonight we have Eric Sammons, a very special guest. And we're doing this on a Wednesday, which is not the normal flow, but I do appreciate you being here. And why don't you tell everybody who you are?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm really glad to be here. So, like I said, I'm Eric Sammons. I am the editor in chief of Crisis Magazine. That's my day job, so to speak. I also am the author of a number of books. I've written 9 nonfiction books, I think it is. Yeah, my last book was on Bitcoin that came out in the when did that come out? In June.
I was
I
going to say that
have
was recent, right?
Yeah, I have a book I'm working on right now called The Catholic Guide. The working title is The Catholic Guide to Artificial Intelligence. So I've nerded up recently. I used to write. There's some religious aspect to everything I write. Even the Bitcoin book is because it's a moral case for Bitcoin. But I used to, I've kind of nerded up recently because I have those two. And then the book I've just published is my first fictional book, a novel called Shard of Eden, and it's a science fiction novel, and that just came out a couple of weeks ago. So so that's basically who I am.
Yeah, and I've spent the last few weeks coming up to this podcast, finishing a read through of that book, so that I'll have actually intelligent things to say and not sound like an idiot, being like, "I read the first page," and Eric, it was great. Those interviews don't usually interest me. But
Yeah, no, I interview people on my own podcast who have books, and I really try to at least nonfiction is a little bit. You don't necessarily have to read every word like you can with
right,
you have to in a fiction, but I really try to make sure I read a lot of it so I can ask intelligent questions. Otherwise, you're kind of floundering.
yeah, it does not go well when you haven't read the source material for what you're supposed to be discussing, because
Right,
that
right.
that immediately is a red flag. You're like, "Oh, wait a
Yeah,
second,
right.
this guy doesn't know what he's talking about." All right.
That's right.
So I have to say, my first thought is there's kind of a dichotomy of stories going on here, right? You've got the past and the present, and they're kind of going intermingled with the chapters. What made you decide to kind of go with that flow for your story? And maybe before that, what was the initial inspiration for the story?
I actually thought of the kind of kernel idea about 10 years ago. And I mean, I think everybody who writes, even like people like me who write mostly opinion pieces and nonfiction stuff like that, we kind of have a dream of writing a novel. I mean, because we all as kids, no 8-year-olds reading some nonfiction book. I mean, they're
Yeah.
reading, like me, I'm reading sci-fi or whatever. And so you have this dream to do that yourself one day. And so I had the idea of the basic idea of a signal from deep space and sending a mission out there to see what it is and things like that. And I had an idea what it would be that they would find. But then a lot of things came together more recently, particularly in my study of artificial intelligence, because as you know, artificial intelligence plays a big role in the book. It
Yes.
actually is set after an AI revolt where there's a whole humongous war between man and machine. Man fortunately wins, but it's in the wake of that. And that was kind of added then to the whole story idea. But I like the idea, like at least
So
in my own.
that wasn't originally your thought process, was to have
And
that background.
when I first thought of it 10 years ago, AI had nothing to do with it. Wasn't even
Okay.
part of it at all. So that really kind of came later. And I like the idea of just exploring AI. I mean, one reason I like science fiction is because what science fiction does, it helps you explore current things going on and kind of seeing, okay, what is it? Where are we going towards?
Yeah.
What does it mean? And so I like that aspect of it. So I really liked having the AI parts in it. But then, like you were asking about, like having, because it's set like in it starts in 2109, but then there's a number of flashback scenes, and I just felt like that was a good way. I wanted to. There are 6 main characters on the ship that's going out to investigate this signal, and I was like, okay, I need to make sure people know who these 6 are. I mean, just to kind of get more in depth into it. I originally was thinking of maybe 12 or more people on the ship. And I was like, no, I just don't want to have characters that are just kind of barely show up
Yeah.
and they're more just like kind of distracting anything else. So I was like, okay, I'll limit to 6, which can make sense for a mission like this. And then I was like, but I want to make sure each character you get to know them. I mean, there's a couple main characters, but like I want all 6 of them that you kind of were like, who are they? Why are they there? What are their motivations? What are their thoughts? And so I thought, okay, the best way to do that was give some background on each. And so each of them get at least, I think it's 2 flashback chapters. I think maybe one has 1, but you kind of get to know who they are better. And I thought that just to be a nice little vehicle, a way for letting the reader kind of know who they are. In fact, one of my kind of beta readers who read before it was published, just to give feedback, she was saying, like, after after they were all introduced in the first, I think it was in the second chapter, they all get introduced. And she was like, oh, I'm not gonna be able to keep track of these people. Then all of a sudden the flashback chapter started coming. Oh, she's like, oh, okay, now I can distinguish who they are.
Yeah, that made it a little easier to kind of, okay, this person is this person is that. You got your engineer, you got your priest, you got your brother. You can kind of keep track of the characters by their backstories a little more, and it makes sense. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of why I did the structure the way it was, with the flashbacks, because I thought that would be a good vehicle for letting you know each character. And so by the time we get to like the real action, the real climax of the story, you hopefully have identified with the characters and and kind of like what they're doing and what their motivations are for the decisions they make.
That makes sense. I have to say there was a chapter early on. I think it might have been the first quarter of the book, where you have this discussion on humans kind of sympathizing with the AI and the chaos war that was going on, and it really kind of reminded me of kind of these. Not, I wouldn't say, and you know what an NPC is in a video game. I'm assuming, right? Like people that you have a lot of that going on, even in like modern politics, where people just are barely paying attention. They feel sympathetic to a cause, and they're kind of controlled by the narrative with things, right? Yeah. And I kind of got that sense of feeling like maybe the AI was doing that kind of thing with people, because it could just feed you with information and you might be sympathetic to that information. Like, is that kind of the thought process?
And I actually think that's happening. I think it's happening right now. I think a lot of I think they estimated, I can't remember what the percent was, but it's a huge percent of content now on social media is AI generated. It's just AI bots who are responding. I mean, like just today, I posted something on X about Trump, and an AI bot, I know it was an AI bot, responded. And I responded to it saying something, making a sarcastic remark about being an AI bot. And it responded again in an AI bot way. And it's like, but that's how they're shaping, and so like, for example, if all of a sudden, you get a bunch of AI bots to really magnify a message of somebody, stuff like that really does start to impact us. And so it really is an issue already today. And of course, in my future, I set in the book, just the idea of the AI being, something that, the one thing I want to make sure it's clear that, like, in real life, we never agree on everything as humans. Well, yeah. So even in this, chaos war, which I call the war between the AI and man, a lot of men are on the side of the AI, because that's the way it would be in real life. I mean, you wouldn't have 100%. You'd have people sympathetic to it because for whatever reasons, they would be brainwashed. They would just be. I mean, a lot of this, like I said, comes from my own reading on artificial intelligence. And one of the things I was amazed about reading a lot of the leading AI thinkers is, first of all, how dumb philosophically they are. But like, really, I mean, just they have
they are. You are absolutely correct.
They are incredibly brilliant when it comes to technology. I mean, I'm not going to take that away from them.
But many of them are spiritually bankrupt.
Yeah, I mean, and really, it's even before spiritually bankrupt. They're just philosophically bankrupt, because like the whole idea of AI gaining consciousness shows a complete lack of philosophical understanding of what the human person is, what consciousness, all that stuff. But like, you see that some of them are really, they can't wait for AIs to get consciousness. They can't wait till we kind of meld with AI and have this new form of humanity that's like
the Neuralink stuff and all that.
Yeah, and all that stuff. And they even, I mean, some of them even, they're looking forward to the day when AI replaces humanity because that's going to be the next step in evolution. And so there's no
That's what they
question.
think.
Yeah,
That's what they
right. I mean,
believe. Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
saying that's their
yeah.
perspective. And so there's no question in my mind that if there was some scenario in the future where, there was a battle between AI and man, there'd be a lot of men who would take the AI side because they'd say, well, this is the next step in evolution. This is like, a better world we're going to get and stuff like that. So yeah, I want to make sure characters, figures like that would be in there as well.
Not only the thought process of the people that would sympathize with them, but also people that would look at the fact they lose their conveniences. Because
Yeah,
if you have AI controlling, like, for example, your laundry machine, right? And then you have to relearn how to do the laundry. People are going to be like, wait, I don't want to do that. Let's just let
right.
the AI take over. Like there will be people that just don't care. They will
I
assume
think
that,
that'll be most people will just get so used to it because I mean,
yeah,
like even now, if somebody said, "I'm going to take away your washing machine, I'm going to take away your dishwasher, I'm going to take all that, all that stuff," most people would be very upset and they would very much fight against that because they're used to just throwing their laundry in the washing machine, doing their, going in the dishwasher like that. So if we get to the point where we have, home robots that are doing our chores for us, and all of a sudden it's like, well, we got to take these away because they're dangerous. They're going, no, I can't, I don't know, even know how to, I don't know how to get off my butt and take my glass and go put it in the dishwasher even because I just hand it to, Rosie the robot and she does it for me. So yeah, it's a real, I mean, there's some real dangers there.
yeah. Not only that, but it does teach kids that it teaches kids a whole different way of life. That, like, for example, I'll be honest, I didn't learn a lot growing up from my parents, like those kinds of activities. But as an adult, as a dad, I've learned a lot of these things, and I'm passing those things on to my kids because I know how important these things are for like hard work, learning how to do just even the simple task of washing dishes, setting aside a time to do it, and washing them yourselves before even just rinsing them off, putting them in the dishwasher. Like, these are simple things that. These are not things I was taught growing up. So like I had to like kind of figure these things out on my own. Not that that's hard to do, but that would be a quick way for kids to not know anything about the world
Yeah.
because they'd be growing up in a world where everything is done for them. And I can see how that would be very jarring, especially if you want to go against that. And
Right.
I saw a lot of that in your
Yeah.
book where there was like, for example, your nurse that is one of the main characters, significant others towards the end that you
Right.
really
Yeah.
learn about her. Their family was going a different way and they were going
Right.
away from the machines, which is an interesting to think about because we're going to be there pretty soon here with like the amount of robots and technology that is available to give us convenience.
Yeah, one of the things in the story I do is like most of the world has become Catholic because of kind of in reaction to a lot of the crises in the world. And so in this world I'm setting, a lot of people become Catholic, but that doesn't mean everybody agrees with each other because like on the use of AI, that's the big debate both before and after the chaos wars that some Catholics are saying we can still use AI responsibly and others are like we need to just abandon it. I call it the new Luddite community, not in a negative way, but that's just kind of what they call themselves because they're like, no, we're going to go back. In fact, one of the main characters is part of a community that basically lives almost a monastic type life, even for the for the lay people, and they're just basically kind of living a life without machines because they realize the dangers. Whereas other people are like, oh, and I try to make both sides sympathetic because I don't think there's a one right answer as far as how much we use technology. I think this is a big debate that is a good debate. I mean, I admit I come from a background. My degree is in systems analysis. I was a computer software developer for 15 years, and so I know I kind of lean a pro technology way, but at the same time, I think I'm pretty cognizant of the dangers of technology, and I think it's a real debate among Catholics. And you have all the way from the side that wants to go almost pure Amish, which I respect, and I don't have any. I'm not going to say anything against them, but then you have the others who are just completely like accept every and all new advancements as goods because they're just inevitable. And I'm like, well, that's not that great of an idea. And so I tend to get geeked up about new technologies, but I do try to look at, okay, what is the actual impact? I read a book years ago about a guy, a Catholic, who went and lived with an Amish community, a pretty hardcore Amish community. And he was talking about it. Better Off is what the name of it was.
Better off.
And
Okay.
yeah, Eric something. I remember he has the same first name as me, but I can't remember his last name now. But it was very interesting to learn the thought process of the Amish because it wasn't what I had thought. the stereotype of the Amish is they're just anti-technology, knee-jerk anti-technology. And what they really do is they evaluate intentionally technologies, and they come to a decision, will this help or hurt our community? Will it be something that brings us closer together, drive us farther apart? And then they make decisions on what technologies they will use. And usually they end up with modern technology saying no, because they feel like it will go against, their community. And I think that's I think that basic premise is a good one to have, of, okay, like, I mean, we do that. I think like most of us, we just started using smartphones and we didn't even think about the consequences. And we all have smartphones now, and nobody was like, and when we got them, nobody thought, when I remember, I'm old enough, I remember smartphones first came out, when the iPhone really was the big one in 2008. And nobody thought, okay, you know what this is going to lead to? It's going to lead to being addicted to doom scrolling all day and, harm relationships. Nobody thought that, but that's exactly what happened. And so,
Absolutely.
and the same thing is true of AI. And I'm not one who says we need to ban all AI or anything like that. I just think we need to be thinking ahead of time. What are the uses of AI and what are the dangers of it? And try to think it out a little more than we've done in the past. And I think, and that's kind of the debate in this book, is a little bit of like, okay, what's the purpose of AI? And like, and like I said, I try to be sympathetic to various points of view among Catholics, of being, some are more against it, some are more for it, and give both a sympathetic ear, so to speak.
It's funny you mentioned the smartphone, because I've recently discovered that if I turn off notifications for almost all of my apps, I'm more purpose driven when I use my cell phone.
Right. Yeah.
Notifications are like that addiction bubble. It's like, as soon as you see one, it's like, oh, I got to click this button and figure out what this is. But if you turn that off, you're only going into the apps when you know what you want to do, and you're doing exactly what you planned.
Yeah, and I have almost all the only notification. I have very strictly controlled rules on my smartphone. I even use the dumb phone app, so I don't even have the same screen. It's just like there's a list of some of my apps, and my notifications are basically my kids, my adult kids who all have phones. They can get through just about any time. But nobody, very rarely can anybody else get through me notifications. So what I do is I just schedule, okay, I'm going to look at my phone at these times and see what messages. And I figure, I mean, I remember I'm on the familiar life where we didn't all have to be instantly available to everybody. And people honestly have learned, if you text me, I'll get back to you probably, but it's not going to be instantaneous, more than likely, unless I happen to be looking, at my phone right then. It might be hours, it might be a day or two before I get back to you. And I'm just like, I'm not trying to be rude. I'm just more like my life, I can't, like,
there are more important things than being attached to your phone.
If I'm reading to my 10-year-old daughter before bedtime, and somebody messages me, I'm not dropping that to go message them back. I want, so I think that, and I'm saying this from somebody who's done those dumb things in the past. I have, like, looked at my phone when I'm supposed to be playing with my daughter or something like that. And so I don't want to keep doing that.
I get that. I grew up with a landline. I didn't get a cell phone. In fact, I didn't even get a smartphone until probably like 2012 or 13, somewhere in that time frame,
Right.
when I was already in college. So like, for me, the internet, I'm going to be 33 in December. So I'm like right in that cusp of, like, the internet was part of my childhood and it wasn't. It was like that brief period between those two things. And I have 5 kids, 6th one on the way, and my oldest is 8. So thankfully, I'm not even fighting the smartphone battle yet. That won't be an issue for a while.
My kids are, the oldest is almost 29 and my youngest is 10. And it's interesting because, and so my oldest, when they were, the whole smartphone thing was just kind of like how parents, what do we do with these things with our kids, was just starting off, and there's a lot of debate. And I will say, I feel like we let our older kids, they got them when they were like 16, and now with the ones that are still in the house, they're 18. I mean, at 18, I'm kind of, you're an adult. You don't have to get one, but I'm just kind of, I'm not going to tell you can't have one at that point. And hopefully we got, so like, even that, it's like everybody's having to figure this, what are the limitations, things like that. Us, like, we've just evolved in hiding in smartphones for the, use with the kids, and on the other side, kids are not getting phones.
I completely get that, and that's going to be something my wife and I'll have to tackle as our kids get older. But
yeah, good luck.
I've read a bunch of books about this. Like the smartphone thing is
Yeah.
not good. It's bad for the brain, especially
No,
teen
no, it's
brain,
not. No.
because you don't have a
Oh,
fully
yeah, yeah.
developed what is it, the
That's
frontal
right.
cortex. So like
Yeah, I know what you're talking. Yeah.
that on its own just tells me like it's just not a good idea to give a kid who's already like, look, squirrel, something that's
Yeah,
gonna.
right.
So
Yeah, I
and
think, in
I
fact, I
think
think
I was go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think the way the brain works, I think it'd be first, I don't think anybody needs a smartphone, but like I think you should be in your 20s really before you start using one because I think the way the brain develops and stuff. But like I said, when somebody's 18, we in our family at least we look at them like, well, you're an adult now. You're gonna make your own decisions. We'll give you advice and everything. But
Yeah.
like, so if some 18-year-old kid of mine is like, I'm gonna get a smartphone, I'm not gonna tell him no just because I'm like, well, hopefully we've trained you, you'll use it responsibly.
Yeah, that makes sense. Uh, so the next question I have related to your book, and maybe this is kind of a deeper philosophical question. It seemed to me like the further you develop the chaos war, the more you kind of develop the idea that AI is essentially a tool that got outside of its bounds programmatically rather than something that became sentient. At least that's what I got out
Yeah.
of it.
Yes.
And that's kind of how I view the issue of AI. It's not that we're worried it's going to gain some consciousness, like it's going to
Right.
become self-thinking. It's going to get outside the bounds of its programming and somehow do something with, whether it's a glitch or whether
Right.
some nefarious actor puts something in there that doesn't belong there, and it'll start doing bad things. Like imagine if a robot with bombs on it in California, which allegedly those exist, went to the wrong
Yeah.
place and just bombed the wrong house. Like this is the
Right.
type of things that could happen with AI if there's a glitch or a problem with the code. So
Yeah.
this is not outside of my realm of like thought process with AI.
Right.
Your book really kind of develops that for me. It makes sense.
And that is exactly you hit it right on the head. You really noticed that, and I'm glad you did because it's exactly my thinking in writing it was obviously when you write fiction book, science fiction, you can be fantastical. It doesn't all have to
Yeah.
be like I'm not like everything in there. I'm not saying is actually what it can happen, but what I am saying though is I purposely avoided the whole AI getting sentient or conscious because I just don't think that's possible. But what is
I would
very
agree with you there.
possible, what is very possible is AI going outside its bounds. There's a famous in the AI world. There's this famous example called the paperclip problem, and what this is like the idea that you develop an AI and you say and you give it the directions. I want you to make paper clips as efficiently as possible. Make as many paper clips efficiently as possible. Well, then what happens is it gets more and more intelligent and more able to control other systems. Its only purpose is to make paper clips. And so it would start like maybe shutting down other processes, start shutting down like, electricity in a city that powers like people's heat in order to make paper clips. And then it starts, converting literally humans into paper clips. I mean, all of a sudden the whole world is just paper clips and like it's destroyed everything, but it's done exactly what it was told to do.
Right.
And so that's the real, I mean, obviously not the exact example, but that type of thing is the real problem is when the boundaries you give it, the directives you get it are, if they're not done correctly, then you could have real problems. And one of my favorite science fiction series is the Isaac Asimov robot series, which are amazing because he wrote most of these stories in the 50s.
Yeah.
And he really, I mean, I just read another short story I hadn't read before. He wrote in 1957. He sets it in 2033. And it's about a robot who basically does things like LLMs do today, where it's like proofing galleys and stuff like that of books and stuff like that. But one of the things it's always, he always talks about is knowing exactly how to direct the robot, in this case an AI robot, direct it in the proper way so it does the right things. And it makes a big deal. Like if you don't do it the right way, it could misinterpret what you really mean. Because when we communicate, we're not always explicit about everything. And so that's something that could happen in the future. A real danger of AI, not the fake, becoming sentient one, is really, though, it's given directives and powers, and it just basically becomes very dangerous for us, just because either because you have evil people directing it, or you just have people who don't do a good job and give it too broad of a definition and don't put in like the safety things of like, okay, like as Isaac Asimov's three rules of robotics, where like, you can't harm a human, stuff like that. Those don't exist in real life. And so, yes, that's kind of where I really think the big dangers can come. There's other big dangers too, but not like, Terminator sentient type thing.
Although, to be fair, in the chaos wars that you developed, you had Terminator style elimination, just not Terminator style sophisticated
Right.
intelligence.
Yeah, it wasn't a matter of the AI is trying to take over the world like the Terminator robots seem to be, like,
Right.
Skynet was trying to do. But it's more a matter of they're just like, okay, we're going to be efficient, and like these humans are in the way from what our directives were. I don't get real details as specifics of what I wouldn't mind one day maybe writing a prequel of the Chaos Wars and going into that even more deeply. But you get a little excited and you have 15 book
Yeah.
ideas, after the first one. So
Yeah, honestly, you could even have like a robot where you say, okay, I want you to preserve the environment for the pandas in China.
yeah,
And slowly it's like, okay, not only am I going to preserve this, but I'm going to expand it so that there's more pandas. And then like
right.
slowly over time, this robot's creeping into human civilization, trying to get more pandas on the earth. Like that is
I mean,
exactly the type of danger I'm seeing here
yeah, because
with
think
that
about
style.
the crazy priorities people have, like the environmentalists and stuff like that, where they're already harming humanity, all for Mother Earth or whatever. And it's like if you put robots and you give them those directives, they don't know. They're not like they don't have some moral code inside of them. They just are. They have the code that they're given by their
Yep.
programmers and by their developers and by the people who command them.
And all right, so getting from the AI, because we'll probably come back to it later, but the other thing that I really respect about how you wrote this book is how long it takes the crew to get to where they're going.
Right.
Because a lot of people think, oh, faster than light travel, you can go from point A to point B in like 20 minutes, like Star Wars does with the whatever the
Right.
version of space travel they have. I
Yeah.
forget. But it's like, but that's not really how things would work, because you would end up with it would destroy the biological components of people if you go too fast. And so like
Right.
if you somehow develop faster light travel, it's still going to take time. And I appreciate that you did that. How did you decide exactly where they were going and how far they were going to go?
That's hilarious that you asked that because it was a lot of thought, more
I
than it
bet that's
probably should have been. And in fact, I changed it a couple times. Like I had different time frames, different distances, and I was literally this. You'll like this. A couple times, I was going to AI to Grok and asking about specific. Okay, if you were going this, how long it would take to get to this place? I was trying to make sure I got the numbers right and stuff like that. Because here's the thing, I think it's very possible that Einstein says in all the science that it's not possible to go faster than light. And it's just, physically impossible. But there are some shortcut potentials. And all of those are all theoretical. And from what we know now, the energy it would take to do that is more energy than exists in the universe.
Yep.
So, like realistically, the likelihood of faster light travel is not really going to happen. But science fiction, we got to have a few shortcuts. We
Yeah,
have a few
there's
things
no
like
reason why science fiction can't use
right,
something that's impossible to drive a story.
right,
I have
right. And
no
I
issue with
try to
that.
make it a little bit realistic, like theoretically and stuff like that. But I really wanted to make sure it was clear that like space is big. I mean, it's big in a way that nobody can even comprehend. However big you think it is infinitely bigger than that. And so in the book, they're going 1,200 light years. 1,200 light years. If you took the fastest thing man has ever created up to this point, ship ever created, to go 1,200 light years, it would take you, like millions of years to get there because
Yeah.
we just can't go anywhere near the speed of light. So I wanted to give, first of all, but then I was like, well, again, I don't want it to be, obviously you can't have people going somewhere millions of years. That's a whole different story.
Yeah.
So I wanted to make it though, that there was a sense of, okay, this is a long journey. I mean, it takes them 8 years to get out there, even though they have faster than light travel. But like you said, it's not just like, I didn't want to make it where you just go one place, like you're here and then you're at A, and you get to B instantaneously. I wanted some sense of sacrifice because that's what it would really be like. And I could have done. I did think about the idea of doing like a Cairo, bed or something like that, where they go to sleep and it takes some, decades and stuff like that. But I really wanted it to be where they're still able to potentially come home and people are still alive that they know. I didn't want to,
Yeah.
because that's a different story. The idea of just giving up everything, but yeah, so I made it where it took 8 years to get out there. My idea and the way I'm thinking of it is it goes faster than light, but if you think about, in the way it's doing, it's like folding space where you kind of, basically what you're doing is you're just kind of folding space. So you're skipping ahead. But the idea that you would just be able to develop something to just be like, okay, now I'm going to the Andromeda galaxy, 2.5 million light years away. It's like, come on. So I try to make it where how I see it is, it's constantly jumping and like part of the way, and then it's like kind of recalibrating, jumping again. Like the people on the ship don't even necessarily know it because I have an AI that actually is helping it, and the engineer that's running it, that's calibrating. Okay, how do I get there fastest, and what are my jumps to make it there? But still, it's like I wanted to make it. There was a real sacrifice involved because to me, it was some of it was like the old days of when you went on you were sailing across the ocean, and so like you're going.
Magellan.
Yeah, exactly. And he's leaving, family, and the people on the crew are leaving family, and they're gone for years. I mean, and just like, and also one of the beta readers said he kind of reminded him of like people when they go on a crusade. And
Yeah.
the King Louis would go on a crusade and he'd be gone for years and he wouldn't come back, and so he'd leave his family and just not come back for maybe 10 years, something like that. And so people used to do that, and it's a real sacrifice. So that was kind of part of the story as well, was that there's a real sacrifice to going across space.
And the other fact that I did appreciate is like having the signal have a source means you don't have to necessarily send them to another galaxy where it's like 80 years of light speed or whatever to get there. Because I've read a lot of books on this exact idea where the faster than light travel. And so I was like, okay, how's he going to make this work if they're going on a mission in space? Well, if you have the source not necessarily in another galaxy, then you don't have to worry about the 80 years it's going to take you to get there.
Right. And also though, but then you have to figure out, and I was making sure I got the numbers right on stuff. It's like you have to realize if it's 1,200 light years away and you're receiving a signal, that signal travels at the speed of light, which means it left 1,200 years ago. Yeah. And so like that was part of the story too, is like this signal originated. They know it originated over 1,000 years ago. And so that's part of the mystery as well.
Yeah, because once you get even if you were to get something from space, like let's say there was a signal, like theoretically speaking.
Right.
Whatever sent it may not be there anymore.
That's right. That's right. And that's, in fact, that's the whole thing, like astronomy. If I'm kind of a geek about astronomy. And so you're looking back in time. Whenever you're seeing anything, it's back in time, because it's not even the sun we're seeing back in time. The light we see from the sun is 8 minutes away. I think it is something like that. And so literally like we're seeing 8 minutes ago in time when we look at the sun. But stars, of course, when you see a star that's 1,000 light years away, that light you're seeing was first sent before Thomas Aquinas was alive. And so like,
that's wild.
I know it is. It kind of blows your mind when you think about it. And so like trying to grasp your head about space and time and how they're connected and like just the distances and all that, it's fascinating, but it is a little mind-boggling. And so part of that had to be incorporating the story. Like I said, you can make certain fantastical things in the science fiction story. It's okay, but there has to be like the same kind of rules of nature. I think you don't want to mess that up too much, because then people are just like, oh, you're just making stuff up. I mean, completely out of the blue. It's like, unless it's like a totally different universe or something, that's one thing. But like if you're still set in a relatively realistic time, like our times or near our times, you want to make it where it's not too crazy.
You mean you didn't want to have sand planets with spice on it?
Yeah.
If anybody gets the reference.
Oh yeah, I get it.
Oh yeah. All right. My next question for you is like, how did you decide which characters were going to be on the ship and what their careers were going to be? Because that was also kind of, you ended up having essentially 2 religious on the ship, and I'm like,
right.
That's more. That's probably one more than I was going to expect to be there.
Yeah, because in this world, like I said, there's been a real revival of the Catholic Church, and in the world I see it is the church continues to decline into the 2030s, 2040s, but then through a number of crises in the world, a lot of people convert. A lot of people come back into the church. The church becomes powerful again. And in response to the AI revolt and the chaos wars, they actually have an army, and they have it's like the Middle Ages, where and so the Vatican is the most powerful political force in the world. And so the Pope is basically the leader of the world. So it's the Pope who sends this ship out in this mission. Well, the Pope's not sending a ship on a scientific mission in deep space without having at least one priest there. And then I also have a Dominican brother, and that was more just a matter of, he's really the medical officer. But I was like, why couldn't it be why couldn't it be a religious who's also that? And I kind of wanted to have that as well, to have a little bit of two different, because I think sometimes, you don't want to have, some books when who are written by non-religious people, they put a religious person in there. It's like very stereotypical one kind of character. I want to make it, at least, because they have some discussions where they don't agree with each other, because that's real life as we know in the church.
Yes.
It's like you could have, two different religious who aren't always in agreement. So I definitely want to have a priest. That was very important for certain aspects of the story. And then having the brother was more just a matter of like, well, why not have a religious? And then the main character, Dominic Rourke, the captain, I admit some parts of that were like an idealized me. I'm not a military person. I'm not as heroic as he is, but he's about my age. He's, has a wife and a number of kids, but duty is very important to him. Like all the things kind of I would strive to be. I tried to make him kind of like that as well. And so that, because, you want to write a little bit like what or at least what you want, things like that. But then I also want to make sure
most people do end up writing themselves into their story in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the thing, is like my book is a very deep Catholic ethos. I try not to be preachy, but it's like, well, that's what I know. I mean, literally, I've been living as a Catholic. I have a theology degree as well. I'm like, living publicly as this Catholic, figure and stuff like that. And so it's like, Catholicism is what I think about. So it's going to be in the story, because you don't want to write about something you know nothing about. Like if I started writing like details about biology or something like that, I don't know anything about biology. It would just be dumb. But I do know about, geekiness of science fiction, space travel, astronomy, AI, Catholicism. So that all comes in there. And I wanted the characters as well, like they have different personalities. Like there's one guy who's, very sarcastic, very, always making jokes. I have a super nerd engineer type. And I have a guy who's like more a taciturn, like a quiet, secure. He's more of a military kind of quiet guy. So I tried to have like different personalities. Well, but one thing I will say though, and I was like, I have a huge pet peeve when it comes to modern, like movies particularly, but also books, is like the idea that women are equivalent to men when it comes to physical stuff, and that there's no big deal putting men and women together. This is a potentially 16-year mission in a space.
We agree on this aspect entirely, and I appreciate that you didn't put that.
I was like, I'm not putting women on this ship because a smart pope set in 100 years after after things have gotten better in the church, we'll just say that. He's not sending women and men together on a 16-year trip. That's doomed for failure.
That's a disaster idea. Honestly.
It is. In real life, that's a disaster. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. So every crew member, all 6 of them are men, and that's on purpose, because I'm like, it would just.
Well, men are mission oriented. I mean, that's right.
That's right. Out. Exactly. It's going to be men, and also it's like, and if I made it with women in there, and the story was the exact same, I feel like that's just like, that's not. A good book, should be realistic in the sense of how humans work, how we work. And like women wouldn't be the same as men on a mission like that. And when you put men and women together, the men wouldn't be the same if there's women there. You can't just interchange them for the story and be like, oh, I'm going to make this character a woman.
It changes the dynamic entirely.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you're cooped up on a ship that long, there's going to be a lot of temptations amongst the crew, which
exactly.
So you just wouldn't do that.
Right. And they didn't do that forever until recently. I mean, like I said, these trips like Magellan and stuff like that, they didn't have women on those ships because they knew that's just not going to work. So that was a conscious decision of mine because I just thought it's dumb to do it now, and they're not going to be dumb in 100 years.
Well, so it's funny that you say that, because Michael Crichton's written a bunch of fantasy novels, especially science fiction. And one of his earliest ones was The Andromeda Strain. Have you read that book?
I did years ago. Now I don't even remember what the plot was. I've read a number of his books, but I haven't read them in a long time.
So Andromeda Strain is interesting because it is a crew of men going in to essentially try and solve what this virus is and how to stop it. But in the movie, they decided to switch one of the men out for a woman. And it completely, like, even though the story flowed almost identically, it changed the entire crew's like dynamic.
Yes, exactly.
Subconsciously, because the way that the actors even reacted to her versus a man in the story was different. So I do appreciate that we were more realistic with this story, because and the other aspect is people think, oh well, what if you just send all women? Well, have you ever had a bunch of women living together for a period of time and not had some kind of drama or fight.
Yeah, it's just I
It's
mean,
gonna
God
happen.
made us certain ways, and
Yeah,
women have their beautiful gifts
they do.
that we could never ever replicate. And men, the same thing is true of men. We have gifts that women cannot replicate. And a mission like this, it's made for men.
And throughout all of human history, that was
Yeah.
kind of the way things were
Yeah,
until
absolutely.
recently. So,
Yeah.
anyways, that was another good one. The other dynamic I thought was interesting, um, amongst the crew, was each of their backstories seems to have like a, especially the gambler, kind of a
Yeah.
flaw, and the trip was kind of a redemption arc for several of them. Do you want to talk about your thought process with those?
Yeah, that was very important because, like, in my mind, the way I thought about it was, okay, 6 men, all Catholic. They're all, like, serious about their faith on some level. Like, they don't just push it, like, they all believe. But I was like, okay, it's gonna be really boring if they're all just a bunch of holy rollers or something like that. Like, I at the same time, here's the other thing is, though, I do think people overdo that some, and they try to make everybody like there's not one guy. Like, the priest in this story is pretty much on the up and up. I mean, he's a
Yeah,
pretty
yeah.
faithful and holy guy because there are priests like that exist. That's the thing is, like, people act like, everybody, like, we can't have heroes. We can't have people who actually do, like, saintly people. There are saints in the world.
I have met some priests that I could compare with your father Matteo in the story, and
Right,
they
exactly,
are very good priests.
right, and so, like, I also didn't I was because, like, you see that a lot of times too where, like, the priest character is, like,
Did I
basically a
pronounce his
philan
name right? It's
yeah,
Matteo, right? Yep.
Mateo, yes, yeah. He's like a philanderer or something like that, and, like, whatever in the background, but, like, no, I can have a priest who's actually a holy guy, but at the same time, it's boring as a
If
story of every
everybody's
guy
perfect.
is
Yeah.
just, like, perfect and stuff like that, so I really wanna make, like, Sean, who's, like you said, has the gambling in his background, things like that, has some flaws, and Michael as well. Michael's, kind of my favorite, the one I like the best, I admit, um, just certain characteristics of his, but just I thought it was important that, like, because that's realistic too, that we're all struggling.
Yeah.
But I do want to have some type of redemption arc. Like, I didn't make it, like, as I didn't, like, try to tie every bow up or something like that. Like, everything, single thing is solved and stuff like that. Cause in real life, that doesn't happen until you die.
Right.
And so, but at the same time, there should be a progression towards a deeper relationship with God, a deeper holiness, and things like that. So I was trying to show that in this mission, this time frame, people are hopefully drawing closer to God through it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I have to say, your ability to write a story is very. I mean, you're good at it. You're very good at it.
Oh, thank you.
Um, I'm sure that there would be some comments if we were to talk about the end of the story. I might have a little more comments, but we're going to leave that for the viewers to actually sort through, because I think it is definitely a book worth reading, and that's why I wanted to interview you. So if anybody wants to check out Eric's book, go to shardofeden.com. I do think this is the point where we could probably take a little detour from the book and talk about some other things at the same time.
Yeah,
Like, for
sure.
example, I do want to say I really appreciated you mentioning that when it comes to the pro-life movement, there needs to be more men at the front of it. Do
Yeah.
you want to talk more about that? Like, what's your thought process there? Or
Yeah, I mean, I was very involved in the pro-life movement in the 1990s in college. I got arrested in front of abortion clinics and all
did
that
you
stuff.
really? I don't remember
Oh
that.
yeah. Yeah,
Did
that
you?
was back in the day in Operation Rescue, and so, I think I was arrested about half a dozen times, and, so I was very deeply involved. Now, I'm not claiming to be a member, like a practicing member of the movement in
Yeah, I mean,
recent years. That mostly, basically, in my state of life, what I do is I try to pray in front of the abortion clinic on, semi-regularly, things like that, and, of course, still very pro-life. But I remember, like, basically, when I got started, almost every leader was a man.
mhm.
And it was very activist driven, very much let's do results, and very much, like, focused on the evil of abortion, pictures of aborted babies, things like that. And that was the focus. And then the kind of the whole argument from the left was, from the pro aborts was, oh, men trying to tell women what to do. And all of a sudden, the pro-lifers just got weak kneed, and they're like, "Oh,
Yeah,
we need to make sure we have women in the forefront as our leaders, as at least as our spokespeople and stuff like that." So we kind of mute that argument against, against the pro-life movement. And then what happened was the women took over. And I'm not, by the way, every single woman who, spends her time doing this, I'm not trying to knock them. I think they have
No,
very
I
good
I I
intentions.
don't think you did. I don't think you were doing that at all.
Yeah, they have very good intentions, and they're trying to. But the fact is, as we've already said, men and women are different.
They
And so
are.
what you started to see, there was much more an emphasis on the mothers as victims, and there are victim mothers. I
Yes,
mean, some 16-year-old kid who gets pregnant and her parents like force her to get an abortion. She's a victim. I mean, she's
absolutely.
because we, especially if like she, got pregnant through means that weren't, a 16-year-old, you just do dumb
Yeah,
things sometimes, and so I get that. But the reality is, if you look at the numbers, most abortions, we're
are
talking women
elective.
in their 20s who are just sleeping around on the weekends and then they don't want to deal with the consequences. These are
Yep.
not victims. They're making these decisions. They're choosing to do this. They're choosing, first of all, to be promiscuous, and they're choosing to be murderers. And we don't want to say that anymore. And so I do think that has blunted our ability as pro-lifers to really defeat the evil of abortion, because we don't focus anymore on the horrific evil of pulling a baby apart limb by limb. Instead, what we focus on is all these women are victims. We're trying to help them. Now, both are true on some level, but like we've forgotten the first one completely. And so it's gotten to the point where I just think God has made men to be the leaders. And
Yes.
so the men, and some of them, yes, men need to step up some. And I heard some people complain to me about that, but like, well, I was there. The men got kicked out, and they basically, and the women took over, and the men didn't feel very welcome anymore. Because here's another reality: women will follow a man or a woman, men will only follow a man. And
Yep.
you might not like it. I mean, you don't care, but like I'm saying, some men like that.
I don't care.
That's the reality. And in fact, women are more likely to follow a man than a woman, but they might follow a woman, but men will only follow men. And so what you did was you just basically kicked all the men out of the movement. I mean, I know there's still men involved, but the point is
Yep.
like it used to be way more. And like rescue the getting arrested from abortion clinics, stuff like that. Now that one mostly fell apart because of the FACE law that made it a federal crime with 10 years of jail if you did it even once. But a lot of it also was the men were the ones driving that. I mean, a lot of women rescuers. My wife spent more time in jail than I did, but like, the point is that like the men were leading it. They were leading the charge, and it made sense because this is a physical active thing where you do put your body in some danger. And so
Yep.
it makes sense that the men are the ones who are at the forefront of that. And so, yeah, it just changed the whole outlook of the pro-life movement. And I just think that the way God made it is men should be the ones leading everything, not just the pro-life movement.
Oh, I think we agree on this almost 100%. Let me see if you agree with this thought process. I do think that some men, the way that they are failing women, is that they let go of their headship before they've let their daughters off into either their vocation, whether it's religious or marriage. If you let your daughter off before she's actually found her vocation and she makes these decisions on her own, I think that's a failure as a father in some ways.
It's interesting. I have 6 daughters. So this is real for me. I have 6 daughters and one son. And I will say, like I said, my oldest is 29, my youngest is 10. And over that time, I've kind of seen a lot and developed my own views. And I'm basically in agreement with you now.
Okay.
It's taken me some time, but I think, like, for example, like my son, my focus was on, you need to, obviously my focus on all the
Making
kids
him a man.
yeah, my
Yeah.
focus on all the kids is making good, helping be good
Yes.
Catholics,
Yeah.
obviously. But
Absolutely.
for my
First and
son, it
foremost.
was like, I want you to be self-sufficient and able to support a family and be the head of a family one day, or to be the head of a parish
Yep.
or
Yep.
whatever, something like that, whatever your vocation is. And so there was a sense of, I'm not kicking him out of the house the day he turns 18, but there is much more of a, you need to have a purpose here and a direction, and you need to be able to support yourselves and yourself. And you can't be like, just hanging out playing video games in the basement of my house when you're 25 years old. I mean, there needs
Why
to, so
not? I'm just
yeah,
kidding.
right. And so that's the thing is like, it's like, I'm not saying like if 25-year-old man is living with his parents, that's like always in every situation a bad thing. I'm just simply
Right.
saying that because I also understand what the economy is like, and and how difficult it is for young people. So I'm not like, but my point is that that was kind of my attitude towards my son, but my daughters, especially my
It's
younger
different.
daughters, it come along is much more like, okay, I want you to be able to find out what your vocation is, religious or as a wife and mother, and I want to, help you develop that, and you can stay here as long as you need to for that to happen. Now, even there, if I had like a 25-year-old daughter who clearly was just kind of lazing around and not really directed, I would be like, I'm kicking you out of the house if you don't
Or you're giving them a direction to go in the
right,
meantime, right?
something, yeah,
Yeah.
that's not acceptable either. So the point though is that like it is very different, the two situations. You don't parent them the exact same way, the boys and the girls. And so I basically I am in agreement that it is natural and right for the father, the parents, to support their daughter until they are, living out their vocation.
Because it is like I view it as part of my job to make sure that when my daughter does find her vocation, that she's thoroughly thought it out and she's made the right decision. And I have two daughters now. I said daughter, but I have two now. So, thank God. Hopefully we'll have more. But
Yeah.
at this point, we got
They're
two
great.
daughters and three sons.
Yeah, the daughters are great. I love all six of my daughters to death, and they're all great. I mean, I will say that I'm very proud of each one of them. So
part of that is definitely the parents. So you can pat yourself on the back, obviously, if they've turned out well. And the other aspect of that is that they're good natured, right? I mean,
yeah. I mean, it's funny because I have a grandson now too. My second daughter.
congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. My second daughter has a 1-year-old son. And one of the things I'm noticing so much, I noticed it some when we were raising our kids, but like, the older ones, but as well. But like, it's like we're developing two different species of human beings now, because like these homeschool kids and these kids who are like raised a certain way, like my grandson, my daughter and her husband, they're like this past weekend they went hiking in like, and they did a camping trip where my grandson's like in the, crawling through leaves and has the dog with them and stuff like that. And then I go to like the local restaurant and I see these kids, with their heads in these screens
Completely
different. And it's like, these are not the same species of being practically. I mean, that's how different they're going to be. And it's a little scary. But like, it really is amazing how different, like, I'm not trying, I don't think to myself, okay, how can I raise my kids as different from the culture as possible? It's more just like, I'm going to raise my kids the best way possible. And by the way, that's becoming more and more anti the dominant culture as time goes on. Like more so when I was raising
we're the
older
rebel,
daughter.
us doing the more traditional lifestyle, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. That's right. And so it's crazy how much it's changing over time.
Yeah, I have to say my kids are outside a lot. They love being outside. There was one day it was like we hadn't gotten all the snow stuff out yet, so we're like, it's snow on the ground. That means we got to go get all the boots out, all the the giant puffy pants and the big coats, and it's like tomorrow, kids. We don't have the energy today.
Exactly.
But they love being outside, and I love seeing them outside. And they would spend pretty much from sun up to sundown if they could. But currently, our kids are going to a Catholic school, and it's a very good Catholic school. And
Good.
If anything changes on that front, though, they'll be coming home for homeschool at that point.
Well, our philosophy has always been 1 year at a time. Like my oldest daughter went to a Catholic school the first couple years, then we switched to homeschooling. And every year that we never said like we're going to homeschool for the rest of our life. Now I think that's what we're going to end up doing just because of the nature of like the schooling available where we live and all that stuff. But like we always said each year, what's best for our kids and what's best for each kid. I mean, I know families where one kid is homeschooled, another kid goes to, the Catholic school or whatever the case may be, but you got to be very cognizant of what's best for your own kids.
Yeah, and what I have seen a lot, especially in the area that we live in, is a reclaiming of the faith in the schools. Because for a long time, one of the local schools changed from a Catholic logo to kind of a very secular, not logo, a Catholic motto to a very secular motto. And I was like, what the heck? Like, it had the word champions in it. I was like, that doesn't sound like a very that motto doesn't really fit the bill here for a Catholic school. It's like maybe we should rethink that and come back to maybe a Bible verse or something. But
exactly.
as I've seen people my age coming into these programs that are very faithful and they care about it and they're trying to kind of reclaim what was lost, 50 or so years ago. They're really bringing the school back to what I would expect it to be. And it's been really cool to watch. And I'm seeing some other stuff happening in like other areas, but I've seen some people getting hired out at Notre Dame that they really care about their faith. And I'm hoping that will make Notre Dame a very, very Catholic university far into the future.
Yeah, let's hope so. Let's hope so. Exactly. So
But I guess the next question I would have for you related to that, you're a cradle Catholic, right?
no, I'm a
Well, you're a
convert.
convert. When did you
Yeah.
convert?
32 years ago when I was 23. I'm 55 now. Yeah. So in
What was that like?
1992. Yeah, so it was like it was during the it's funny because I've seen things ebb and flow, but the 90s were a big time for converts. Like we got a
Okay.
lot. I mean, Scott Hahn kind of led the charge in the 80s, but then the 90s, there was a lot of people. In fact, at one point in the late 90s, it was like 150, 175,000 people were coming to church each year in America. Now, a lot of them ended up leaving again, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it was really through the pro-life movement. It was like I was involved in pro-life movement as a Protestant, but most of the people were Catholic. Like in my pro-life college group, everybody was Catholic except for me, all the main people working. And so like here I am literally like, getting to Protestant Catholic debates in a jail cell, with other fellow pro-lifers and stuff. So, and seeing
How
the
long were you in
Catholic,
jail?
not very long. Like I got arrested
Okay.
6 times, and each time I was in for a couple of days and out. It wasn't
You got
like,
arrested 6 times?
yeah, yeah.
That's
So
dedication. Good for you, man.
yeah, or stupidity. I don't know. My parents probably would have said the latter. But yeah, and so like it was just one of these things where it allowed me to interact with faithful Catholics who were really serious about their faith, because how pro-lifers would be. Because in I went to public schools, growing up, and so like the Catholics I knew, the only thing I knew about them is they went to church on Saturday afternoons, which I thought was weird, and they weren't very serious about Christianity. So I didn't have really any respect for Catholicism, because I in high school kind of had a conversion experience to Christ as a Protestant, and so my faith was very important to me. And no Catholic I knew took their faith seriously. So like I just thought it was kind of a joke. And it was, but though, when I got involved with pro-life work in college, all of a sudden the other pro-life, these are Catholics who are really serious about their faith. A lot of them were associated with Steubenville. I didn't go to Steubenville undergrad, but like I was in Ohio. And so a lot of these events be Steubenville students and things like that. And so that really helped me to see like, wow, these people are real serious. And then like the abortion issue was a big one, because I was United Methodist. United Methodist Church is officially pro-abortion, at least it was back then. I think it still is.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They were like, basically,
That's
they were
crazy.
like, abortion is allowed. And I knew that was I was like, there's no church of Jesus Christ that can be for abortion. And so
I would
that's when I
agree with
started
that.
looking. I was like, okay, I have to leave and go to some other church. And to me, it was like just another Protestant denomination. But then the more I looked, the more I was like, well, who's to say they're not going to change? I mean, if I become Southern Baptist might change. And they did actually. But then, and so finally I was like, realized it's the Catholics who are not only pro-life, but they will always be pro-life. They literally can't change that. And so that was that kind of opened my eyes to make me then, of course, there were a lot of other hurdles, but that was the
Yeah.
thing that kind of was like, okay, I will look into the Catholic Church.
And what was it like going through that process in the 90s? Like, what was your catechism like? Do you feel like you were catechized well, or?
Well, the RCIA I went through was awful. It was a nun in a pantsuit who was like, basically she was a heretic. But fortunately, my friends who my one of them ended up being my sponsor, and my friends who helped lead me into the Catholic Church, they were doing things. They were reading, like, they had books from like Catholic Answers, and like, I was reading the Catholic Answers magazine, which was called This Rock at the time. Carl Keating had a book. I was listening to Scott Hahn, so I had gotten some real education on. I didn't know nothing about the whole traditional versus Novus Ordo, all that stuff. It was just all Novus Ordo, but conservative, like Orthodox Catholicism. And so that's what I knew. But yeah, the actual official RCIA stuff was it was awful.
Yeah. When did you discover the traditional liturgy? Because I know you got a lot of articles about the TLM. I'm assuming that's what you attend at this point, correct?
It is.
Yeah.
And I started attending regularly in 2011. I went to my first one probably in like 2005, 2007, something like that. But it didn't have much. But then I moved in 2011. Our family moved. And the area we went to, all the local parishes were really not very good. But there was a TLM about 25 minutes away. And we're like, well, let's go check that out. And it was more like a process of elimination. We're like, we don't want our kids going to these lame-o parishes, so we'll just go to this one. And then we end up falling in love, of course, with more than just the fact that it was not irreverent. It was like more than that. So that's really, so since about 2011. So it's been a while.
I know that you do know Anthony and Rob, who I do like them quite a bit. They're cool guys. But
Yeah.
Rob says that they had liturgical dancing at his local parish. Do you ever like have something like that occur at any of the masses you went to?
Well, not we always, whenever we move somewhere, we would try to find the best parish. So we would find one that would be best Novus Ordo parish, and we'd find one that
Yeah.
wouldn't be egregious. But the worst was when we would travel,
Yeah.
and we would I remember going to a parish on All Souls Day where the priest preached and denied the existence of purgatory
Oh no, really?
in a homily on All Souls Day.
Oh no.
I mean, and I mean, I've heard other things. Like every time, we be on vacation. Now, what we do is we try to make sure our vacations never fall on a Sunday, so
Yeah.
that we're always at our own parish at home. We can just go to, we leave on a Monday or something, like come back on a Saturday. Or if we're going to be on a Sunday, we like literally everything revolves around, okay, on that Sunday, we're going to be near
gonna
a
find
TLM
mass
parish,
somewhere,
just
yeah.
because I don't want to have to deal with it. And so, yeah, so I've seen a few things, but usually it's a matter of just cheese ball stuff where it's just, just awful music, felt banners, and just homilies that were just like lame, and like an army of women coming up for like to be Eucharistic ministers and stuff like that. So
I would love if somebody could figure out, and I don't know that this is able to be figured out, but the germ specifically says like there needs to be a reason to use extraordinary ministers.
yeah,
So who makes that call and at what number? It never, like, I just can't wrap my head around
it
how at a
basically,
Novus
if
Ordo.
they think it's going to take more than a minute to distribute communion, well,
Right.
we need an army of them.
It makes no sense to me.
Yeah, no, it's awful.
So anyway, I'd love somebody to actually develop that, maybe talk to a bishop, figure out what that actually means. Because I'm like, none of the masses I've been to, except maybe Christmas and Easter, have had an exorbitant amount of parishioners where you need extra
Right, yeah.
ministers. And even
Yeah.
then, I'm like, the priest can still do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's twice a year. You can have a little bit longer. I mean, the way we do it is we do have enough priests that we have another priest come out to distribute communion. So the communion rail, we have a priest on each side, so it goes pretty quickly because we have about 500 some people there.
Yeah.
But sometimes we don't, like a priest will be out of town or something like that. We'll only have one priest, and it might take 25 minutes just to distribute communion. Not a single person complains because it's
Extra
like
meditation time.
I know. It's like, what's the rush to get home to? I mean, like, this is the mass. This is Sunday morning. This is what we're supposed to be doing. And the problem, though, is, of course, priests are getting complaints. Oh, I need to get Johnny to a soccer game or something like that. Well, it's like, you shouldn't be going to a soccer game on Sunday morning. So, you should be
Actually,
it's okay if mass is a little bit long.
That is one huge compliment I will give to the former Archbishop of the Archdiocese of Detroit, Archbishop Vigneron.
Right.
He ended all Sunday competitions for Catholic sports in the
That's
Archdiocese of
great.
Detroit.
I love that.
He
Yeah.
ended it. He was like, no more of this. We will not
Makes
have
no
any
sense.
conflict.
Yeah, it makes no sense for Catholic sports organizations to have the games or practices or whatever on Sundays. I just never. That was a big. My son was very involved with sports. I had a daughter too that was involved in some as well, and we always were like, we're not doing things on Sundays, and it was a real struggle. And I will say a few times we kind of compromised on that. If it was like a big playoff game, last game, like, okay, we're going to mass, son, but we will go to this game. But we tried to avoid doing Sunday stuff.
It's hard. I mean, sometimes my job demands that I work Sundays, and I'm like, I always feel like very torn about accepting doing that, even though I know if I don't, well, it's my job on the line. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, there are jobs where obviously, if you work at a hospital, for example, somebody's got to work on Sundays because people are still dying and or getting injured. Some on Sunday, so clearly there are people have jobs that sometimes work on Sundays. So
Jesus did heal on the Sabbath, so I imagine that's a good justification for doctors and nurses to work on.
Yeah, and a lot of other things. Air traffic controllers don't want planes.
Right,
Maybe planes shouldn't fly. I don't know, but anyway.
Certainly shouldn't start their journeys on a Sunday. I wouldn't think that's a good idea. But on top of that, if you're going to start it on a Sunday, there should be a priest aboard and an altar, just like your spaceship.
Yes, exactly. That's right.
Honestly, that would be a cool thing to have a priest on any plane. Because what if your plane's going down? Like, I want my last rites.
I want that priest giving that general absolution. Flinging holy water around while I'm going down.
Yeah. So. Please give me that on my way down.
Yeah.
My goodness, that would actually be a nightmare scenario. Like being on a plane and finding out it's going down. Like, oh boy, here we go.
Yeah.
All
now,
right,
I do think, by the way, I wanted to bring up, we can't ignore the thumbnail. I know we can't talk too much about the book, but you do have aliens in there, and if people came for aliens, we got to at least talk about aliens.
That's a good point. We spent a lot of time on AI.
Yeah, exactly. And, and so without talking about the book, the funny thing is like, I find that I'm shocked by how much Catholics freak out when I bring up aliens. I did not realize there was going to be such a pushback from people. But like, I'm not saying they're all wrong. I'm saying that it is a little surprising to me how strongly some people feel about aliens and whether or not they exist and stuff like that. And so like, I just, for me, I'm a science fiction geek, and so like, obviously I like the idea of aliens in books and things like that. And I do think aliens can be very good literary devices
Yes.
because
Oh,
they really
absolutely.
help us to understand humanity. I mean, the whole thing about Star Trek was Spock is there because he helps you understand the humans better. And that's why the Spock character works. Same with Data in Next Generation. It's like the non-human character is often the one that helps you understand humanity better. In fact, there's a great scene. I'm going to geek out here a little bit, but like when Spock dies in the second Star Trek movie, Captain Kirk in his eulogy say of all the souls he's ever met, his was the most human. And it's like kind of a thing, like, what does that mean to be human? Stuff like that. So I really think aliens work on that. And like the thing is like, there's like a theological and a scientific view of aliens, like whether or not they exist. The funny thing is like I've read a lot on like the scientific, whether or not aliens could exist, stuff like that. I really think let's just take for a second to set aside the theological issue and just look at it scientifically. I think there's a good chance they don't exist, just from that perspective, because of the fact that if you look at, people always talk about like the first thing like a Carl Sagan says is like, okay, you have all these trillions of planets, and we do. Like, what are the chances we're the only one with life? Okay, I get that argument.
Yeah.
However, the problem is if you look at everything that came together for us to have life on this planet, it's astronomically large the number of planets there are. Astronomically, pun intended.
It's a huge number. Yes.
Yeah, but it's also astronomically small. Everything the chances of everything coming together to allow
you could almost
our
say it's
planet to have
impossible.
life. I mean, basically, it's like it's so difficult. So if you weigh those two together, that whole like there's billions and trillions of worlds kind of falls by the wayside when you realize how unique the Earth is from what we know. I mean, I will admit, we've seen every world there's ever been out there, but we know enough to know that this world is very unique. And so many things about it. I mean, like one of the things like people don't understand, if we didn't have the planet Jupiter, Earth couldn't exist like it does. Because Jupiter basically protects us from like asteroids and things like that.
Yeah,
If we didn't
it
have
grabs
a moon,
every asteroid and takes it
right?
out of the warpath of Earth.
Yeah, the gravity, it's so big and so its location. The moon. If the moon wasn't the way it was, we
wouldn't have the tide.
That's right, exactly. There'd be so there's all these things that come together. And of course, obviously as Catholics, we know they don't come together, just like by coincidence. They come together because God made it like that. But like, even if I'm talking to somebody who does not have faith, I think I can make a good argument that the likelihood of alien life is very intelligent life, particularly, is very, very low. In fact, I read a book.
I could see bacteria somehow escaping the atmosphere and ending up somewhere. And you could have bacteria,
I'm even open to like just even plant
like
life and stuff like that. Maybe potentially on some planets, something like that.
We've had stuff collide with Earth. It's possible something left.
Yeah, and just even
intelligent life developing on its own externally to Earth, I do not believe in that period. That's
and so like I would say, like I could even see God having. I see no theological issues with God having like plant or even animal life on other planets, because he might be like, he sees that one day we're going to go out in the stars and we're going to also, live on these stars, some planets. And so they're going to be compatible with human life. Okay. That I don't see how there's a theological problem with that, because we're not talking about rational life.
Yeah, I mean, people somehow manage to colonize Mars. I don't think that hurts anything theologically.
Right. Exactly. Now, the intelligent life, of course, is the real thing. And I've heard the argument, I've read the arguments that's theologically impossible. I'm just not there. I think, whereas I don't think it's likely, I don't think it's really possible. I don't think it actually is. I think that you could make a theological argument for the possibility that you can't like tell God, you can't say God just can't do it, that he could do it. And now I know there's a lot of issues with like whether or not the intelligent life would be, fallen or unfallen. If it is fallen, would it, how would it be redeemed? Would it be redeemed? Is there an incarnation? Is there like a second incarnation? Is there an alien Jesus? Things like that. All those are real questions, and they're not like ones you just throw aside. But I do think there are possibilities. And if you look at the tradition, you see that, like, I mean, here's a good example. St. Thomas Aquinas actually said that there's no reason why the second person of the Holy Trinity couldn't have become a second human, taking on a second human nature, like become a second person, a second, not person, because that's, divine person, two
Yeah.
natures, but taking on a second human nature. So it could be a Jesus and then another one. Now, of course, didn't happen,
Right.
but if that's possible, maybe it's possible that the second person Trinity could become, human nature and an alien nature. I think there's a lot of problems with that, but I just, what I always don't like doing is I don't like going
You don't
so
want to put
far.
God in the box.
Right. That's exactly right. And I don't want to put God in a box that the church hasn't put him in. I mean, obviously the church didn't really put, but the church has said there's certain, I mean,
You're not putting God in the next Ark of the Covenant. No, I'm just kidding.
right. Yeah. But like the church, obviously has the authority to set limits on what we can believe and not believe about God and about,
Yeah.
salvation history. And those I fully accept. And I'm never, I will accept those completely. Like, there's not a fourth person of the Holy Trinity type of thing. But at the same time, if the church hasn't done it, I'm like, well, it's possible, and I honestly, I like the debates too, because I think they let's see more deeply, understand our own tradition, our own, salvation and redemption and who Jesus is and things like that. If you kind of if you want to look at, okay, how would an alien race, could it be saved? That you have to really understand how we're saved. And so that helps, and because like there's a debate, like St. Anselm, he very much kind of believed that the incarnation was necessary. That was the way we had to be saved. St. Thomas Aquinas does not. He does not say that God could have saved us in a different way. So if he could have saved us in a different way than the incarnation, perhaps he could save an alien race in a way other than an incarnation. It's not impossible to say that.
Isn't there like a medieval saint with some writings that it wasn't Aquinas. It was a different one that there was a lot of arguments related to the thought process he had, where it was like a plan A, plan B situation. It started with a D. I can't think of the guy's name.
I'm not recalling that. Yeah, I'm not sure. But
anyway,
yeah.
there's like a whole fallacy built in. They had a lot of discussions in medieval ages about plan A, plan B related to the incarnation and everything else. And it was really interesting. The word Dunstan keeps coming to me, but I don't think that's right. I think that's the wrong name.
Well, there was a St. Dunstan. I don't think it was him, because that was the English bishop.
Yeah, I don't that just keeps coming back to me, but I don't think that's right. If I think of it later, I will bring it up. But there was like a whole discussion on that, which was interesting. And I remember reading it, or maybe listening to a podcast, one or the other. I've read a lot of books, so it could have been either way. I've read St. Irenaeus, all of his work. That was awesome. I love St. Irenaeus.
Yeah, he's great.
I've read the early church, Saint Eusebius of Caesarea, I think, or bishop. Right. I don't know if he's a saint or not. Actually, to be honest, he might be.
Eusebius of Caesarea. I think he is. There's another Eusebius who is an Arian.
That's a different one. He was friends with Constantine, and
he's the one who baptized Constantine.
Yeah, that's a whole different ballgame. But the funny thing about the Arians is they would have still had legitimate baptisms if they did it right. So
yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly.
The baptism for Constantine would have been legitimate, guys. Let's just be honest here. I'm pushing for, at some point, maybe there will be a cultist to bring forth a Saint Constantine, but maybe
he is a saint in the Orthodox Church,
right?
Constantine is. So I think it's funny. One year, I had my son dressed up as Saint Constantine just to kind of like blow people away, because I was like, we'll just call him a saint early.
There's like Blessed Charlemagne, but the reason I bring up the early church is there's a lot of arguments to be made similar to like mythological creatures such as like the Nephilim. In the same conversation, you're having conversations about like the potential for aliens.
Right.
Nobody alive today has seen any of these things other than maybe bones left behind like dinosaurs.
Right.
So if you're going to put the box around like, well, I believe in this particular origin that's not necessarily laid out in Genesis, it's like, well, wait a second. If you can believe that, how come you can't open your mind up to this potential? So for me, it's like you either believe that the box exists and you're living in that box and you're not going to step outside that box, or you're not in the box and you're like, okay, I'm open to these things that the church hasn't defined.
And that's where I am on the latter. And really, we know for a fact that God has created two species that are rational, and they're very different in how he has interacted with them and how he created them. I was talking about the angels and us.
Yeah, okay.
The angels, of course, the angels do not have bodies.
Right.
They have the whole different way that they work, in the fact that they make one decision for God or not, and then it's permanent, because they can make a decision. Like, we can't do that. We're more temporal. When we make a decision, we can change our mind. We can, repent, or
Yeah.
fall or whatever. They can't do that. And so we already know that there's two different rational species that are very different in how they act, and how God made them and how he interacts with them. There is no incarnation for the angels. And so, like, they were saved or damned through without an incarnation, and they had no way of changing that. So, like, the idea, and so, like, throughout church history, you do see, like, I think it was St. Jerome, he talks about, like, these some type of mythological type creatures, but he thinks they really exist and they're rational beings. So he clearly thought it's possible for there to be a third category of rational beings that somehow, works. It doesn't, like, break Catholicism, because it's possible maybe that God could create a rational being that once they die, they just cease to exist. I mean, they're just alive, some rationality or something like that. Maybe they don't have immortal souls.
Well,
Maybe they,
people are trying to make that argument about killer whales because they have such a so much
right,
brain tissue or folds or whatever the argument is, that their brain is more sentient than their standard animal.
right.
And so, like, those animals, there's no rational way to say, like, the killer whales are going to heaven or something. Now, obviously, none of us are in heaven, so we're not going to be able to say there's no, like, the seven, like, what was it? Dante has the 7 levels of hell. Who knows? But as far as I'm aware, there's no way that a rational animal, despite being rational, would be able to actually go to heaven if they're not part of God's design for that, like we are.
Yeah, and so, like, it just is. I just kind of feel like God is so much beyond. I mean, we know certain things about God. Don't get me wrong, but we're limited in our knowledge of
Yeah.
God. We don't have full knowledge of his plan of salvation, his ways. So if there is some alien species in the Andromeda galaxy that we'll never interact with, and they're completely different from us in how he created them and made them, it's like, okay. I mean, I'm even like, if it's like multi-dimensional, I do think it's a joke, the scientists who are like try to explain things by saying there's like multiple dimensions, because it's funny, because they're trying so hard to avoid any suggestion of like religious belief that they create another religious belief that they can't prove through science, of these multi-universes that we have no way of scientifically proving. So it's like, it's a joke. So I'm not saying that. I'm just simply saying that, why couldn't God create multiple universes that don't have any interaction with each other, and yet he's ruler over all of them? I don't know. I mean, like I said, I'm not saying these things are likely. I'm just saying I don't see how they undermine our faith, because it doesn't do anything against, we know what he's done for us, and
Right.
we should be very grateful for that. And that's what it should be. And that should, of course, be the main focus. But there's nothing, I don't think there's anything wrong with speculation, as long as we don't do anything that contradicts what the church has taught us.
Yeah, and as far as I'm concerned, similar to people having differences of opinion on the span of time since creation
Right.
and aliens and etc., these things are not things that are going to condemn me to hell for agreeing with or disagreeing
That's
with.
right. That's right.
So
Yeah.
for me, it's like, as long as we both agree the origin of the universe is God,
Right.
and Catholicism is the true faith, we're on the same page for the most part.
Yeah, and I feel the same way. Like, I don't have, I personally think that the universe is basically what science says it is. It's 13 billion years old. The Earth is 4 billion years old. But I don't have any problem with some Catholics. Like, I think it's 6,000 years old. I think the world was created in 6 days. I mean, I might not have that Catholic teach my kids science, but I'm not going to have any problem. There's a very good chance that person's holier than I am, and getting a much higher level of heaven than I am. So I'm not like, I'm not going to like criticize their faith in any way, shape, or form. I might disagree with them and argue with them about that aspect of how old the Earth is. But like, if you tell me though that the Earth was created only through natural processes, and souls were just through evolution, and no God intended, like, okay, now I'm like, now we're
The
fighting
evolution, that's a question I wanted to ask you. So there's this discussion on evolution. We're like, okay, so if apes became men, when does God put the soul in those men? Because, like, to me, it's like, there's no way evolution in that way could be true because of that fact. Because God would have to, like, pick a time when these people are not and these people are. Like, that to me doesn't sound like
It's
anything
a
I've read.
very, I've never been able to square that circle either. Like, I
Yeah,
do think like the universe is very old, and I do think the problem is we throw out evolution and we don't really define it
right.
carefully enough. types of evolution. For example, like planetary evolution and like universe, like the things come together and stuff like that. And then there's evolution, like I should say there's like like the star developing over time, and then planet forming and things like that. And then on it forms like that. Then there's that type of evolution. But there's evolution of like non-life to life, and there's evolution of life to intelligent life. And I think that these are all three, they're different categories of things, and they need to be looked at separately. Because to me, I've never science has never, and I don't think it really has the tools to explain a jump from non-intelligence to intelligence. In fact, this is the underlying philosophical flaw of most AI people, to bring it back to that.
Yeah.
Because they believe so strongly in evolution of non-life to life and non-sentient life to sentient life, they think they can just repeat the process that's why they think AI can become sentient, because they think that's what happened to us, was just like through some random, physical process, we became intelligent. And so if that's true, then why can't we do that on computers? We'll just do this, eventually the mathematics will work out that all of a sudden now we're intelligent, because they limit our intelligence to the brain, the physical brain, and not the spiritual mind. And so, like, to me, it's ludicrous. And there's the funny thing is, I've read a lot on this, like the science on this. There's not a single bit of scientific evidence, and there can't be really, of like that all of a sudden intelligent life just kind of pops up through some natural process. It's just a joke.
Not only intelligent life, but like, how do you go from inanimate
non-life to life
objects?
too. Yeah, I agree. That too.
That to me, unless you can somehow repeat that process scientifically, there's no way to disprove that a godlike figure exists. So for scientists, it's like, how could you ever say like, oh no, we know that life came from? No, you don't. You have no idea.
Yeah. It is very much a statement of faith they make when they say that life came from non-life, some natural process, because they've never been able to replicate it. And I don't think they ever will, because the idea that all of a sudden just some cells or something, just like somehow a lightning strikes and now it's animate. It's a joke. It really is. Intellectually, it's a joke.
Absolutely. So now that we've kind of covered, is there anything else you wanted to say on the aliens topic? I think we've kind of hit that.
I think I want to make sure I got that off my chest a little bit, because like it's funny because it's kind of, some people, they think I'm like a big alien guy. Like, okay, I actually do want to say one last thing.
Okay.
I don't think aliens have ever come here. I mean,
I would agree with that 100%.
That is like, I do think it's, like I said, I think it's unlikely that aliens even exist, but I do think it's possible. I don't think as a Catholic I have to believe it's not possible. I think it's possible. I actually think it would be kind of cool if they did, but that's neither here nor there. But all the stuff of people who are saying they've been visited by aliens and stuff like that, none of that I think is real. Like, as far as like it's actually aliens, I think it'd be a number of things. Now, people like to say aliens are demons. I do think some of these. I interviewed some lady who actually was involved in the UFO movement, and she was very convinced that she's now Catholic, and some of it was definitely demonic. I mean, there's no question. Because they're literally calling down these aliens to inhabit them and their bodies and stuff like that. So
they're essentially communing with spirits they don't understand.
Yeah, it's demonic. But some of it's just misunderstandings. It's frauds and hoaxes. It's just, they see something that's a human plane or flying object, and they see it wrong, or lights. And so I do think some of it's just simply that. It's not all demonic. Not every claim of alien visitation is demonic, but I do think some of it is. So yeah, I just wanted to make sure that, because people kind of jump to, oh, you think aliens are possible, to all of a sudden you're like chasing UFOs. I'm like, no, I'm not chasing UFOs.
I would never suspect that a guy running a Catholic magazine would have the time to chase UFOs.
No, don't have time for that either. So I like writing about, stuff like that, but not actually chasing them in real life.
And that was more due to being a plot device. And I do appreciate that.
Yeah.
It reminds me of, we talked about this before the podcast started, but like the Paralandra, because in Paralandra, like C.S. Lewis's space trilogy, he uses alien worlds to drive a plot. that
Yeah.
eventually gets into more progressive politics in the third book, which was super interesting.
Yeah, it
But
is kind of weird how it went in the third book.
the second book, I think, is just one of the best written theology books
Yes.
ever. I mean, it's essentially the main character winds up on a planet where creation has just completed,
Right. And
and
so he's in the
then
Garden of Eden.
and the serpent shows up, and it's like, what would you do? And it's like,
Yeah.
whoa, this is not
Yeah.
something I would have considered. I'm like, this is intriguing.
And that's why it's a great plot device, because it really does. He was able in a fictional book to really get in some deep theological issues, which is why I like science fiction, because I think you can do that. You can get into very deep philosophical and theological issues, which is why I think it's kind of sad that so much science fiction is atheist based. I mean,
Yeah,
materialistic, and that just is. It's been like that since the 50s, because the dominant players of the science fiction world back then were atheists, and so all the science fiction that was published was basically by atheists. And so it became like a dominant thing. One of the reasons I really was excited about writing this book, Shard of Eden, was like, okay, we need to have an alternative, because science fiction is part of our culture. There's nothing
it
wrong
is.
with it, but we need to reclaim it. I mean, Catholics, we need to be out there. As Taylor Marshall says, take up space. So we need to get out there and take up space. And so this was part of that. Like, I've always loved science fiction, but I've always been dismayed by how much of it has bad philosophical and theological underpinnings. So I wanted to kind of, combat that some.
Yeah, and honestly, there's a level of human history that is very unknown due to a certain cataclysmic event that wiped out all of the race of humans at one point in the earth, whether it was a giant local flood or a full earth
Right.
flood, which I subscribe to the full flood of the earth because of the way the Bible's written is interesting. There could be some atmospheric conditions that lead to so much
Right.
water in the atmosphere that when it does finally rain down, you could have a worldwide flood briefly for a period of time. But imagine what kind of destruction would be left in the wake of a worldwide flood,
Right.
and what could have been there prior to it. You could write science fiction in the past, and
Oh yeah. Oh
it
yeah.
could still
Definitely.
make sense theologically, and
Oh
could be a
yeah.
good
Definitely.
plot device.
Yeah. Absolutely. I agree. That'd be cool.
Now, what do you think of, like, this is a kind of a wide topic, but what do you think of the Nephilim? Do you ever think about them at all? Is that something you've ever considered?
It's not something I've been that interested in. I think I just actually heard a podcast not that long ago about it. And it's one of those things where it's like, I've looked into it and I'm just like, I don't really have a strong opinion. I think, I think it's very plausible that, we're talking about like, angelic beings that are mating with humans, human women, things like that. Um, I also think it's just possible. It just was like a race of men that were just very large and things like, a giant. Remember, people back then were like 5 feet tall.
A lot shorter, yeah.
And so, like, if you had, a certain number of men who were like 6 feet tall, I mean, people thought George Washington was a giant, and because he was 6 feet tall, and everybody else was like 5'5" or something less, and something
Yeah.
like that. So it might be something simple as that. Like, I have not really. I know Taylor's talked about some, but I haven't really gotten into it, to be honest.
Honestly, my theory on it is if the Nephilim were truly some combination of angelic and human creatures, this would be like the anti-incarnation, because you're talking about non-physical beings mating with physical beings and creating some aberration. And
Yeah.
if such a thing existed, imagine what kinds of strange things would come out of that relationship. You
Yeah.
could end up with like something that resembles what pagans worshipped, and maybe that's where some of these pagan gods came from, stuff like that.
Yeah, it's
I
kind of
really don't
hard
know.
though, like, to imagine, like, are angels even able to physically mate
I
with
have no idea.
women? Like, my thought is, a demonic spirit could possess a man who then mates with a woman, something like that. But like, they don't. I mean, it seems to me they don't have the physical ability
Yeah, I
to.
don't know.
But yeah, it's definitely one of those speculative things, no
The
question.
other question I would have though is, like, for example, these angels that allegedly did such a thing were changed because God said you are no longer welcome in heaven,
Right?
right?
Yes, that's
That's the
true.
thought
Yeah, good point.
process.
Yeah,
So what happens when God says you can't come back?
right. Yeah,
And
maybe
I
you
have no
transform
idea.
into some physical being or something like that. Yeah, it's possible.
So, and I know that the Noah movie was terrible when it comes to how they handle it. Like these weird rock creatures
Yeah. I
hurtling.
didn't see it, but I remember hearing about that. Yeah.
It's a bizarre movie. I would not recommend it. But I view it that way. And then the other aspect is maybe you have better opinion on this, but I saw this weird thread on Reddit. Reddit's a strange place. I don't know if
Yeah.
you've spent much time on it, but
I used to.
there's a whale sculpture or statue in like the middle of some suburban area. I think it's in Oregon, which, lots of bad things are going on over there. So anyways, but over time, there's like this strange set of people that they go by and they fake prayer to this whale. And I'm like, they started it as a joke. It was a joke. We're going to pray to the whale to do this. And I'm like, how many of these like pagan practices were started as jokes that became traditions that became beliefs?
Yeah, maybe a lot of them.
And I'm wondering, like, with how fractured our culture is especially in the West, it could easily revert to paganism if we're not careful.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's no question we're going in that direction at the very least. I mean,
Do you
Oregon
think that
probably is
there's
already
any
there.
do you think there's any level of that with the idea of aliens? Do you think people are already worshiping them in a way that, because nobody's ever met an alien as far as I'm concerned.
There's no question that some of these alien movements have deep religious overtones, and it would not, and like some of these people who are followers of this is basically their religion. I mean, when you say religion, I would say anything in which this is like your central religious, your beliefs about the way the world works and your practices, stuff like that. Well, if you're going around chasing aliens, if you think the aliens are talking to you, if you're spending all your time on that, that's your religion.
Yeah.
And I think it very much is. And which, like I said, if it's like that deep, it's probably demonic. And so
Yeah.
there's no question that there is and like, the whole thing about like the alien disclosure, like the government, stuff like that. I know some people are very quick to say that like it's a like I've heard like it's some people think the government's really covering up true aliens, but then a lot of people are like, well, it's like a distraction to keep us from the real issues. And I kind of fall on the latter part of that. That
Bread
like
and circuses.
what's that?
Bread and circuses.
Yeah, exactly. That it's kind of a way that like, okay, we need to distract the people from the evil we're doing. And so we're going to, kind of give them some crumbs on this. And you notice it's always crumbs that kind of lead you to think, maybe there's something more coming. It's never like, okay, there's an actually alien spaceship parked on, next to the Washington Monument for us all to investigate and inspect, or an alien body, lying in the Capitol or
There'd be
something
a
like
lot
that.
less questions if you could just go do something like that.
And
People
there's
be
a
like, okay,
reason.
fine,
Yeah.
I believe you.
That's right, exactly. And until that happens, you're not going to find me believing when they say, "Oh yeah, this alien came to," I know somebody who saw somebody who talked to somebody who saw an alien spacecraft. It's like, okay, thanks. That I'm not going with that, buddy. So yeah, but there's no question that there is. I think some people are just misguided and just kind of foolish, and because when you remove religion from public life like we did, then people are just going to replace with other
Absolutely.
religions, and that's exactly what's happening.
I can't tell you how many people I see dressed up as Harry Potter characters, and I'm like, what are you doing with your life?
Yeah,
Like, why are we in public? Not on Halloween.
Did you see that video of that woman, the 30-year-old woman who started crying when she met Winnie the Pooh? It was
What?
yes, she was at something and somebody
Like
dressed up as,
Disney or
yeah, and somebody dressed up as a Winnie the Pooh outfit, and she started crying because she was so excited to meet Winnie the Pooh, and it was just some dude, of course, in a costume. And it's just like, and then you see like Disney, from what I understand, when you go to Disney World and Disneyland, it's mostly adults now who are
it
dressed up
is.
as the characters. And it's like, this is just sad, people, but it's
how
not.
expensive it'd be for me to pack up
Yeah.
5-6 kids?
Yeah.
And how much work that would be to go
Well,
to
they don't even,
Disney?
that's the thing. They don't have kids. They're just still kids. And so,
Yeah.
but again, you take away religion, people are going to fill it with something. And so it might be aliens. It might be Harry Potter. It might be, Disney characters, it might be Star Trek. I'm a big Star Trek fan, but I've seen some people who are a little too into Star Trek. I mean, it's like, come on, guys.
Yeah, it's like, what's that movie with Tim Allen in it where it's like, gosh, it's like a parody of Star Trek. Yeah.
That's a great movie. That's a
I
great
do
movie.
like
I
that
love
movie a lot.
Yeah.
All right, one last question. Then I do have one more pertinent question, and then I'll open up the floor if you have any for me. I think there's this dichotomy between using a story that respects the idea of faith and that keeps people in line, even if they're reading things that in previous centuries be like, oh, that's heresy. But like, for example, your story versus say like an atheist writing sci-fi, or like Lord of the Rings versus like, for example, Game of Thrones. Like
Right.
these are very different approaches to similar ideas. I think it's
Yeah.
important that we keep it in like faith. The faith is somewhere at the center of the story, and it keeps people from deviating or like falling for traps that could lead them astray or into like crazy other worlds with their creative stories.
Yeah, I think the key there is that the world that's being built, if it could be a fantasy world like Middle Earth, or it could be like the world I build, which is just 100 years in the future, but still like Earth and us and stuff like that. It has to still be the basic like laws of nature. And by laws of nature, I mean both physical, but also like moral, like natural law, things like that.
Yeah.
All those things have to still be intact. I mean, one thing you often see on like so many television shows over the past few decades is like these people engage in these immoral practices, in bed and stuff like that. And there's never any consequences. They're just
Yeah.
happy. They're fine. That's just not reality. That's not how the world works. It's not how we are created. And so if you create a fictional world where stuff like that's deeply evil. And that really is problematic. You can and should have evil characters in books.
Yes.
And it's also not true that every time somebody does something bad, they have to have bad consequences immediately, because that's also not real life. There's plenty of people who've been very immoral and been very successful in this world.
Look at Saruman and Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, so you don't have to have, I sometimes I get a little bit, you know, the characters like in evangelical, like Christian, like, movies like that are so simplistic. It's like the bad guy is just like a cardboard cutout, and the good guy is too. So like everybody in real life, nobody is 100% good. Nobody's 100% bad. We're all struggling on some level. Some people are much worse, and you can have, like I said, holy people who really are saints. They're not perfect, but they're saints. And so I think the key is like that world has to have that directs us towards, and I think the story really should direct us towards the true, the good, the beautiful, towards
Yes.
redemption, things of that nature. And you see, I mean, no story does it better than Lord of the Rings, of course. In that, there's nothing, there's not even a God explicit in Lord of the Rings. So it's not even like you have to have somebody preaching a sermon, but clearly the whole book is such a Catholic ethos. I mean, the whole, all the Lord of the Rings, Tolkien said it himself, and it leads you to great stories of, friendship, loyalty, redemption, the struggle with power, things, all that. I mean, the ring, what it represents, all that stuff. So it really is beautiful. And so like in my story, it's more explicitly Catholic because it's in our world. And so there are Catholics and things like
You
that.
mentioned the Pope more than once.
Yes, exactly. And so like, yeah, and some of it's a fantasy in the sense that the church's return to power and, is strong and things like that.
I actually think that is extremely realistic because people
Yeah,
return to their spiritual roots
yeah,
when things go haywire.
right.
And
And
if this
that was,
population collapse keeps going the way it's going,
yeah.
we're going to keep seeing more conversions back to the church. But go
And
ahead.
we've already seen, like in recent years, how young people are coming back to the faith.
Yeah.
Why? Because of the evil around, and
Yep.
so it's very much a reaction to that. So yeah, so I think that good literature does that. It points us to the true, the beautiful, and the good, and it really helps us, kind of to think about who we are and who God is.
Absolutely. Actually, it made me think of one other question for you. If you were to put your let me preface this with an actual example that happened recently to me. I read a book called Children of Men. Have you heard of this?
Is that the one where nobody can have kids?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
I read that years ago. Yeah,
PD James is a great. She's honestly one of the best. Just kind of psychological with crime stuff and whatnot. She's kind of like writes Father Brown mysteries, but like more modern versions of them. And
right.
obviously, it's not Father Brown, but
Yeah,
Children of Men was way outside of anything I'd read by her. And the concept of you take basically where we're at with our fertility rate and just make it zero, and like
right.
what that does to society. And it was just crazy, the kind of stuff that she had thought about. And I'm like, this all makes complete sense. But then I go to watch the movie, and the movie is terrible.
That's always the problem. I watched the movie too. Yeah, the
They made
movie's,
the entire thing about illegal immigration. I'm like, what does that have to do with no births?
yeah, I know.
Why is illegal? Oh, I was so mad. Anyways, so what would you do if you were to either do a TV series or a movie? How would you handle your story coming to the big screen? or wouldn't you?
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't think every story can be well done in a movie or TV because of the way we're kind of our expectations for it. I would change the story some for a movie because I purposely in the first maybe third or so of the book, part of my purpose of that was to get a feeling for the men on the ship being there for a long time. Like
Okay.
as you know, I started real close to their destination, but then I have these flashbacks, but I have them
Yeah.
talking. Part of it was like building this anticipation because they had to experience 8 years of this. I wanted at least part of the book. I didn't want like the kind of the reveal to happen in the second chapter. It's
Yeah.
like, okay, well, a movie, you can only do that for I mean, you got to kind of have some action,
Yeah.
and so, like, I'm not sure, how I think I would do it more. I might emphasize the flashbacks even more in because there's more a lot of the action. The first part of the book is in the flashbacks, not in the current time. And so I might do that more, a little more world building and stuff like that than I maybe did in the book. Yeah, it's an interesting question. I'm not quite sure what I would do. So,
Oh, and there's one more question I've asked most of my guests. I should ask you this one as well. It's a very short answer unless you have a very deep thought on it.
yeah.
But Genesis 3:15, is it he shall or she shall crush thy head? Do you have an opinion on this?
I do, and I'm going to annoy everybody with my opinion. I know I do. I literally was just teaching this to I teach a scripture course for homeschool high schoolers. I think it's both. I really do. I think because if you look at the Hebrew, it's he. If you look at the Latin, it's she. And like I think both are true. I think it is true that obviously Christ is crushing the head of Satan, but he's doing it through Mary. Mary is, the co-redeemer, the co-redemptrix with Jesus in doing this. And so I honestly, I do think I'm fine with either translation, to be honest. And I think both are theologically, both he and she are true, which I know people get mad at me because they're like, take a stand. Don't be in the middle of the road. I'm like,
I
well, that's
actually have less of an issue with that stance than if you just said he and that was the only answer, because
right.
in my mind, only Protestants stick to he and only he.
Yeah.
Because if Jesus is going to crush the head of the serpent, faith alone makes a heck of a lot more sense.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, and I think though I think obviously we know, like when we teach about Mary being the co-redemptrix, it's through Jesus. Like we know Jesus is the ultimate redeemer. Nobody's questioning that, and so saying he crushes the head of Satan is a true statement because when he dies on the cross, that's crushing the head of Satan. But we also know the grace has come through Mary, and Mary is very much the woman, and so like so I think you can't say.
I think that scripture has a lot more. What's the right word for this? It comes back more than just Jesus on the cross. I think it comes back with the gates of hell shall not prevail. Because if you're going to crush the serpent, you got to crush him completely. And obviously the devil is still out there, right? He still exists. Hell still exists. And if the gates of hell shall not prevail and she shall crush thy head, I think it also is a reference to the bride of Christ, the church, crushing and defeating the gates of hell. That's my personal take on it. I've developed this over the past few years. My thought process.
Very good. I like it.
But that's why I always ask. I'm like, it's such an interesting one line of scripture essentially that has so many different options. All right, so I'm going to open up the floor to you now. Is there anything that you want to ask me?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask you what are your favorite like science fiction books that you've read?
Science fiction.
You talked about Children of Men, of course, that you like that book. What are some other books you've liked?
I really like Michael Crichton's works, especially like the Jurassic Park. He oftentimes takes a concept of science, takes it past what's realistic now, and shows you why science in pursuit of nothing but science is almost always ending in disasters. I really appreciate that thought process, especially when it comes to things like Jurassic Park. There's a couple other ones. The Andromeda Strain, actually, the thought process he had past the original book was continued by another author later on, and that one got really interesting because they were trying to repurpose the viral strain. I'm like, ooh, that hits a little close to home these days. I really like Frank Herbert. I know that Dune is kind of a controversial series since he's like a fallen away Catholic, but I really look at Dune as almost a commentary on the Middle East, especially Islam.
Yes, very much
and
so.
how bad it is to have a Messiah unchecked, like Muhammad.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's how I view Dune. It's like a commentary, and until you get past the first 2 or 3 books, and then it gets
Yeah.
way out
The
of.
first book is great. It gets really weird though after a
Even the
while.
second book. The second book was still good because it
Yeah. Yeah.
shows how a movement can get out of the control of the leader. Because
Yeah. Right.
Paul
Right.
really loses control of what he starts.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
So the
Yeah.
first two I thought were great. The third one, that's when you get into the weeds. Oh, this guy is going to turn into a worm. I'm like, what the heck?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I really like that one.
Good.
I
Good.
love the Space Trilogy by C.S. Lewis.
Right. Yeah.
That is one of my all-time favorite series of books.
Great.
I've read it at least 3 times all the
Yeah,
way
that's
through
very
from
good.
start to finish. And his commentary on progressivism in the third book is it annihilates any idea that progressivism could be a positive movement within humanity. So
Yeah. No, it's a takedown. That's for sure.
Foundation, I like Foundation. I hate the TV series, but I
Yeah.
like the books.
Yeah. Yeah. I have not yet read. I've read the Robot series, which of course, is set in some, a previous in the same
All of
kind
his
of
books
universe.
end up connected somehow.
Yeah, exactly. So I really need to get into the Foundation books, and I haven't done that yet.
Actually, the Foundation, the way I would describe it, is essentially the fall of the Roman Republic and the birth of the Roman Empire in space.
Okay.
That's
Very good.
basically what Foundation, at least the first book, is.
Right. Right.
Because they basically emulate all of that in a science fiction universe. So
Very good.
What about
Good.
you? What are your favorite science fictions?
Like I mentioned, Asimov's Robot series, I really like. I did like Dune, the first one. Space Trilogy, I love. I think it's great. Some other random ones. I'm trying to even think. I did like some of Michael Crichton books back in the day. There's one. What was the one? I'm blanking on the. I have it sitting over there. I can't see it right now. But there's another series.
Wrinkle in Time?
No, I can't remember now. But one thing I'm reading right now. Have you heard of the Sun Eater series?
I'm actually going to be interviewing the author of that sometime soon.
Very good.
I'm not going to nail down a date because I don't have that yet, but we're in contact.
Very good. Good for you. I've just finished the first of it. It was recommended to me by a lot of people, and so I've read the first one. And
Did you like it?
I did. I liked it a lot. And I hear it's the worst of the series, so that's a good
Fair.
sign.
I mean, to be fair, like Taylor Marshall's trilogy got better in his St. George trilogy as he wrote it.
Yeah, it's not uncommon, that happens. So those are kind of the ones I like. So, and I do like Star Trek. I mean, I'm a Star Trek fan. I don't like the new Star Trek. New Star Trek's crap. I'm talking about like the original series, Next Generation. A lot of philosophical and religious problems in it, but I still, I can bear.
I mean, I enjoyed the Star Trek movies. I thought they were okay. The new ones.
I did too. I did, but like it's the new Star Trek, like Star Trek Discovery and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, where they brought
garbage.
back Picard and it got really strange.
Woke garbage. Yeah, it's just awful. So
that's what I've heard from people that I know that really liked Star Trek. I haven't watched. I don't watch much TV, to be honest.
Yeah,
but when I do, I'm very careful about what I watch because I don't want to subject myself to.
I almost watch.
A, I don't want to subject myself to bad TV or bad stories, but B, I also just don't want to open my brain up to things that could be damaging or bad.
And I watched almost nothing from after 2016 because everything just became so woke and so crap, just like pushing trans and gay and all that stuff. I forget it. So
no thanks on that stuff.
Yeah.
And Star Wars, I have a soft spot for Star Wars. I really
I like the first 3 movies, and I'm like, on the rest of it, I did like
prequel. I didn't mind the prequel trilogy. The original trilogy is amazing, is excellent, although my kids don't like it because the sci-fi effects are so old at this point.
Yeah.
But
Star Wars, actually, the first Star Wars movie was the first movie I ever saw in the theaters.
Really?
I was 7 years old, I think it was, and my dad took me to it. And the first time I ever went to a movie in the movie theaters was Star Wars.
I want to say my first live action, because I saw a few cartoons in the 90s. I want to say my first live action movie in a theater was Lord of the Rings.
Oh wow, that's intense.
I want to say
that, man.
Boromir's death is forever enshrined in my brain as something.
And it was. That's a powerful scene. That's a beautiful scene. So
I was like 9 or 10 when that happened. So I was like, I was pretty young to be watching Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, exactly. So,
all right. Well, I do appreciate you being here. And once again, if anybody's looking for Eric's book, shardofeden.com, you can get the autographed copies are still coming, right?
Yep, that's right. I'm getting a little nervous because I'm selling out again. I'm on my second. I got my first case of books and I sold them out very quickly. I got my second case. I'm about to sell those out. I just got a third case coming to me soon. So, but yes, if you order Shard of Eden takes you either to the Amazon page, you can buy it there. That's fine. or it'll take you to my personal website where you can get a signed copy.
Yeah, and I actually, the reason I got the Kindle version was because it was already out, and I wanted to get through it fast enough for this interview. So it's like,
I appreciate
well, I got to
it.
get it out now.
That's fine. I got no problems with that. So,
but if I do buy another copy, it'll probably be a signed copy, just for fun, and I might give it to somebody that might like it.
That'd be great. That'd be great. I really appreciate having me on here, man. It's been great.
Yeah, we'll have to do it again sometime if you're up for it.
Yep, sounds great. Sounds good.
All right, go check out Crisis Magazine. Support them. Support Eric. Get his books. He's got a lot of good ones out there, and hopefully we'll see you guys on the next one. Bye, guys.